Welcome to Vertical Film School. Today's guest professor is Blessing Azugama. Blessing is a vertical scriptwriter, narrative writer, and content strategist based in Nigeria. She started her journey writing web novels before making the switch into vertical drama scriptwriting. She transitioned from that into a more fast-paced creative environment, and she's been able to sell a few of her scripts to some of the different big platforms in the industry. She's also an African correspondent and editor for Duanjou, which is the web portal that publishes and promotes all the big news in the vertical drama and microdrama space. She runs her own podcast, and she's a teacher and trainer in the vertical drama industry. I'm pleased to have her to come teach us about how she got into vertical script writing and what you can learn if you want to break into the industry. So with that said, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, take your seats, pencils down, phones up. The professor is in. Blessing, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, Blessing. So let's get started a little bit with your journey, because I did do a bit of a summary, but I want you to tell us, your own narrative arc, if you will. How did you get started in the space?
Okay, so I've been writing since I was 12, but I joined web novel writing when I was 16, and it was something that was trending then, and it came as like a huge writing shock for me because I finally found out the first real exposure as a writer is that you're not going to be writing for passion, you're not writing for a system. And it just trained me, especially at my teen years, because when I started, I was getting a lot of rejections because I thought that my writing is good. Why don't they get it? But I had to understand that this is all about marketability and all that, like, grabbing attentions, that you're writing for retention because people are reading web novels, either on their laptops or their phones then. So it was very intense. So I had to learn how to make my writing marketable. And I'm so grateful that I was opportune to have that kind of like privilege at a young age, like learning all those things because it helped me over time. And when you're writing for like a web novel, if the chapter does not end in a strong emotional beat, your readers are not going to click to the next one. So the pressure is still there. Even the paywall system too is the same, as similar is similar like verticals, because your readers are going to pay to unlock chapters when it gets to a particular point. So the pressure to sustain tension over hundreds, sometimes thousands of episodes, we call it episodes then, but it was still chapters, was very, like, it was very steep for us writers. So I had to learn how to develop that discipline around pacing, around like cliffhangers, around emotional escalation and all that, because if I didn't, my book was going to be dropped. Like, it was that intense. We had to do it because once you do it, you get much more viewers. And at that time, I didn't think of it as training for anything bigger. I just thought that, okay, this is a new format for me, and this is how storytelling works online. So it was very fun for me to learn, and I was earning from it. So it was a huge experience.
What platform
So
was that?
yeah, I've written for web novel, for good novel. There
Okay.
are various platforms. High
Okay.
novel is a lot. Yeah,
Okay.
alpha novel is also there. So they have different platforms, and we call it web novel generally because it's on the web. So we call it web novel generally because it's on the web. So yeah, but looking back now, I realized that it's actually trained me for that episodic storytelling that is built around retention. Because when vertical drama started and was gaining traction, my first thought when I saw it was like, these are literally like video web novels. So I was very excited the different approach to it because it was like, this is literally the same. It's like watching what I read in books. You get, because they have and the pop is so similar and identical because it has that similar structure,
And the
which is
pacing.
to like, yeah, exactly, to hook the audience fast and all that, like, and you need to make sure that your audiences, your readers too, are clicking to the next chapter or the next episode. So it just had that same vibe, so it was very easy for me to like blend in, and I saw it play very clearly because when I was even working on my first vertical project, because the transition was very natural. And then I wasn't just learning the storytelling from scratch, just something that I saw as like a visual language. So yeah, that's basically everything.
So did you have to pitch yourself for that first job in vertical drama, or they found you?
Yeah, I think it's they found me, but it's a tricky thing because if I didn't put myself out there, I wouldn't
Yeah,
have been found.
for sure.
So when I first got interested in verticals, the first thing I did was use LinkedIn as my leverage. I started talking about how people can understand billionaire troops, because I used to teach about, writing billionaire, because it was billionaire troops I could write very well. So I used to teach about all those web novel teams and all that. And then this company was like, "Oh, hi, do you write verticals?" I did not know they were called verticals, but I knew what they were. And I had this little phase in my life where I was interested in script writing for a while, and I also learned it as a course in school. So I was like, yeah, just blend the whole thing. And with the guidance and the, should I say, patience of the company I worked with, that was Shorten, they just helped me with everything, and showed me where my flaws were, and that was it. And that was how I got my first vertical gig. So yeah.
So how long have you been writing now in the vertical space?
This would making it like, let's say, 1 year and 6 months, because I started writing professionally like January last year. So it was just like yeah,
Yeah,
1 year
so
and 3 months rather. Yeah, 1 year and 3 months.
yeah, no, that's about right, because I think almost everybody else outside of people who are in China, it's in the last year, maybe 18 years maximum, that I've seen a lot of people come into even I myself came in around September of last year. So it's like around the same time, it's like, oh, this is interesting. Let's give it a go, and then we go from there. So we'll get back into your story writing verticals now that we have a good overview of how you got into the space. You also serve as an African correspondent for Duanjou. Could you talk a little bit about that? How's the vertical drama industry developing across Africa or Nigeria where you are? What are you seeing?
Okay, so I think one thing that I've seen that people are missing,
Hmm.
or what one thing people outside the continent sometimes underestimate, is how the storytelling culture is in Africa. Let me explain. So we've had like decades of serialized storytelling through like
Hmm.
television and Nollywood films, where we had the part one, part two, part three
Yeah,
back then in those days.
yeah.
And they will stop at like these huge cliffhangers and all that, and everyone will like queue to go buy the next part and all that. So we've had this in our, like, in Africa for a long time. And I've noticed something now, coming to the age of like the Gen Z culture and everything. We've known that many Africans are comfortable with, like, this emotional high stakes narratives that's like everywhere. Like, we just like stories through our contents and all that.
Hmm.
So I think that for your question is, what I'm seeing on ground, like,
Hmm.
in Africa, right? So yeah, I think that an important factor is that Africa is a very mobile first environment.
Hmm.
And a large percentage of entertainment consumption happens on smartphones. So
Yeah.
when the owner of, Duanjou, the founder of Duanjou, Guillaume, reached out to me, he already had this wonderful interest in Africa, because he was like, I know for sure that this is something that can make sense and all. And then seeing that I've positioned myself as someone that, is preaching that, Africans can write verticals too, because
Hmm.
that's just how it is. He just said, "Oh, would you like to be a correspondent?" And it was like, building a relationship there, because I was even asked before this, how the whole thing started was, I was supposed to um adapt a French vertical
Hmm.
for African audiences.
Okay.
So yeah, that was how the whole relationship started. But because of funding and everything, it had to be on hold for now.
Hmm.
But over time, this it just put me in that middle where I understood that we can still offer something. So that was how I broke into the African correspondence role for Duanjun. So yeah.
Okay. So, I guess the follow-up question to that will be, are there people shooting verticals actively now in Nigeria? Because I am yet to see one, and that might just be me, right? So I'm yet to see one. I know there's a big presence of Nollywood on YouTube. I just I've not heard of a vertical or micro drama app from Nigeria. Neither have I seen one. I know I've seen job postings of people trying to make some, but I've not seen like,
Yeah.
hey, this is the first one that has come out yet.
So I'm not going to be the judge of anything,
Mm-hmm,
but for the ones I've seen so
mm-hmm.
far,
Okay,
I
so
think
you've seen a few. Okay.
yeah, I've seen a few, but I feel like from my own perspective, it's something like when you're trying to adapt a feature and then make it a vertical. So
Gotcha.
is I feel like some people are not really getting the format yet.
Yes. Okay.
I'm even very excited about like Digital Creator Africa, how they
Yeah.
are trying something to teach people about it, because I feel like once Africans learn the format, they'll be able to start something that could get, because we're not only aiming for our African audiences, we want global audiences too, like
Mm-hmm,
people
mm-hmm.
outside Africa. Like for example, now you said you've not seen it, and I don't know if you're in Nigeria, but
I'm not.
it means that it hasn't gotten to you exactly.
Yeah.
It hasn't gotten. It's still limited within this place. So if we can create something that could reach people across the globe, then it would be very beautiful. So I'm yet to see, but so far I know that people have been training, and I've been hearing that people are shooting. But I've
Okay.
seen in South Africa, and it's wonderful. I would
Okay.
send you the video. I've
Sure.
forgotten the company's name, but I will send you the video of this. They are trying really well. So far, yeah, it's just South Africa and then Binyuma TV so far, I think, but not in
Yeah, I
Nigeria.
think I've seen Binyuma TV. I saw when they launched, but I have not followed
Yeah.
up to like see what's on their platform yet. I just saw when they launch, and I know it's like sometimes when you launch, and then you're trying to get content, and then trying to get subscribers to come and watch. So it does take a whole process between
Mm.
launch and then full visibility and activity on the platform. But I've not followed up with them yet. I need to probably do that. So. Um, You've written for platforms that are not Drama Box and ReelShot, platforms that are maybe smaller and still building. What did working with those earlier stage companies teach you about the industry? I know you talked about them giving you feedback and helping you to improve your screenwriting and making sure that you were able to transition successfully into the space from web novels. But is there any other lessons you learned in that process?
Yeah, so working with like early stage platforms,
Mhm.
it gave me this interesting perspective about how you get to see experimentation like happening in real time.
Okay.
People like Drama Box and Real Shot, they have it all figured out. They're going to literally give you a format and say, this is what we expect from
Hmm.
you as a writer. If you derail, we're going to remove your script, something like that. But other platforms, they're like, we don't really have to do this romance stuff. Let's try something different. Like they are
Okay.
still experimenting. They're not
Okay.
like big platforms here, but they're trying to see if more genres, more narrative styles can come in. And this is also for any writer that is going to be watching this, because I want people to understand that various platforms have what works for them. Yes, we are
Mhm.
thinking that it's all about the hook, the cliffhanger, and and all that, but no, what might work in my drama might not work in real shots. What
Yeah.
might work in real shot might not work in drama box. There are certain storylines that they actually give out there that is like similar, that is like fit for their platform. Let's say for example for drama shots
Hmm.
is a budding platform too. They're not really big on the whole crazy stakes, falling down and catching the girl vibe. They just don't see it as something that is in the I don't know how to explain it, but just to see it as something that is like that big. They
Yeah.
want normal storylines, but then you can add the cliffhanger elements and all that. So
Mhm.
different platforms have what works for them. So it's just working with them just gives you this larger perspective, and you learn things while you're working. And one of the biggest like lessons I've seen in that is in this industry is very much the way it evolves, because companies like to learn how what holds attention and what doesn't. Sometimes they're telling you, oh, let's try this, let's try that, because they are still they don't have anybody to impress. Like
Mhm.
if you're doing something, you just know that this might be big or it might not, and
Mhm.
that's just how it is. So you just have to make sure that, and
You.
I feel like that feedback loop, it helps a bit, it helps a lot as writers, as a writer, because it just helped me to understand what I was doing and all that. So yeah.
Okay. And so walk us through a vertical drama script, what it looks like, because most people watching this are maybe even trying to break into the industry. And then if I recall correctly, there's not been a heck of a whole lot of like courses that have been very public or books in the space. I think in the last, I want to say, 3 months or so, we started seeing authors writing books about how to write a vertical, right? So, in your opinion, just if you could give us like, you know, a minute or so breakdown on, hey, when you're writing page one, is it going to be the same as like a typical movie script, or it's a bit shorter? You have to get straight to the conversation, the action, whatever. You don't care about any other thing.
Okay, yeah. So for writing a vertical script, you need to understand that scripts are written in episodes, and each
Hmm.
episode is around 1 to 2 pages. I
Okay.
know sometimes some people might give you the grace of three,
Hmm.
but just to train yourself in that, oh, let me learn how to compress and learn the pacing well.
Hmm.
I'll really advise that you should keep it around 1 to 2 pages. That's the sweet spot, so that
But
people don't get bored if they
okay.
are reading your script and all that. And then you need to, obviously, this is one thing that everyone has been hearing. You need to start with like a hook. So in the first few seconds, something unexpected or emotionally charged has to happen, and that's what will grab your viewers attention. So you don't just write like, you're just opening it
Hmm.
little by little. No, you have to go straight, hit the nail on the head, like
Okay.
start with the conflict. And then when that scene introduces the conflict, then you have to escalate that conflict, give it that whole vibe, and maybe just give a cliffhanger that will make someone go to the next episode. So
Mm.
you have to do this within 1 to 2 pages. Is how intense it is. And I usually tell my students when they are writing their scripts that they should see their verticals as distractions, because if a viewer is like opens TikTok and stumbles on your work, they came there to watch TikTok, right?
Hmm.
But you need to make your verticals so distracting that they stop scrolling and they are distracted from what they originally came to do.
Hmm.
So that's just the goal. Always make sure that your vertical can distract the viewer
Mm.
from, like, going back to scroll and whatever. Let them just stop and pause, because when you get their attention like that, is very intense. So they need to learn that no matter what. Learn how to, and I love how writers can be very creative. There are different ways you can, bring out hooks. And it doesn't have to be, verbally. You can, with dialogues and all, you can even use visual hooks. You can write about someone maybe that was stabbed or whatever, and they just see that, they're already like, what's going on? It's just how it is.
Mm.
Like, there are a lot of ways you can bring out hooks. And I also want to advise that writers should learn hooks too. Like, literally take your time, go and research about hooks, because some people are like using the same generic hook all the time, and sometimes they can be very boring to watch. So yeah. And also, your episode should end in a cliffhanger, which people already know. So you need to make sure that your audiences
So,
want more. As yeah,
so
sorry.
basically, you're starting cliffhanger to cliffhanger in 60 to 90 seconds. You started the
Mm,
cliffhanger. Well, you started the hook, but I see the hook as also a cliffhanger, right? Because if you're saying
true,
you're right
true.
in the middle of the action, it's like, who's this? What happened? What's her name? Where are we going?
Yeah,
What's going on?
exactly,
You're lost, and then you
exactly.
now have to
It's true.
take that, and then you stop again, and then you. So it's
Yeah.
just a chain of one cliffhanger to the. I mean, I've watched a few, but for someone trying to listen to you and figure out, okay, I don't even know where to get a script to read and see. And yeah, if I'm going to pay for Real Short or one of these companies, it might take me $20 to watch a whole episode before I understand, what's going on and how to fix it. But like the
Mm,
whole study of the hook, for example. So let's sit on that for one more minute before we move on. How would somebody study how to like write a good hook for a screenplay in a vertical?
how they'll study.
Yeah, how
I
how
think
to learn how to get a good hook.
okay. So I usually attribute my way of like writing to my
Mhm.
content strategy skills,
Okay.
which is like very different from what I do as a vertical writer. But in all, I feel like, learning how to market something
Mhm.
can help you with hooks. Let's forget about the fact that it's in the lane of vertical script writing. But if you can learn how to sell something, like, you're like, how would I get this person's attention?
Attention.
That is
Okay.
hooks. But you need to understand the concept of it, the audience psychology on how hooks work. So for me, that's why I told you that I use distractions as a way, because people know
Gotcha.
that distractions are the only thing. Let's say someone is learning in class. If they get distracted, their mind is off. So
Mhm.
distractions are my own philosophy on how hooks can be created. Like,
Okay.
always remember that you're trying to distract this person. If someone, it's a funny joke I usually make, but I'm like, make them watch your verticals to the extent that if they're cooking something, they will forget that something's
Oh,
on the fire.
got you.
It's a funny joke, but it's just how it is. Like, so I feel like that's just how they have to have this marketing mindset that, oh, this is not for fun. This is something that we're using. This is for, like, you're writing in an audience economy, sorry, an attention economy, right?
Attention, yeah.
So you're trying to get people's attention. So yeah, that's just the mindset shift they should have towards like learning hooks.
Okay. And what about guiding aspiring writers towards how to position themselves for an income? Because I know from talking to other writers, screenwriters in the space, that sometimes when you sell your script, that's it. You just get paid and you're off to the next one. Sometimes you're selling your script and it might not be the most lucrative thing, so you're always on the hamster wheel, right? It's not like you're writing a feature play, like a Hollywood feature screenplay, where you probably
Yeah.
get royalties off the movies and all that. So how does positioning yourself or making this a sustainable living work from your perspective? And since you've been doing it for a few months, for a year and 3 months now.
Saying that if the writer can understand the format well, because that's the first step, if they're really like, aiming for verticals, then I just feel like the best way is to just write samples
Mm-hmm.
and analyze what has worked. Because when I first started, I was looking for a vertical script. It was very intense.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was around July last year that I hopped on, like, I was hopping on calls every day, talking to writers, learning from writers. I spoke to a lot of people in this, but it was crazy. It was that intense.
Okay.
But I feel like nobody was willing to share their script. So I had to
Very
like
true.
just ask questions. I had to ask questions about it. I was like, okay, fine, because I'm that kind of person that would learn. And then, one writer gave me hints that, okay, blessing, what you could do is, go and watch a vertical and try to write what you're watching. So when you just react it and all that, you'll be able to get the mental structure of how to write and
Mm-hmm.
all. So when I did it, I realized, oh, I watched this 1 minute vertical and it was like 1 point something pages or 1.2. I said, oh, so it just trained me in a way.
So reverse
And that
engineer.
is exactly. So that was what I just used to start. And then what I started doing is that I stopped thinking of like having that mindset of, even if I don't have a portfolio, I have samples to show. Like,
Yeah.
what's the worst that could happen?
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, verticals isn't more like features where you have to sell the script.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to first start with the pitches. So it's from your pitch. And that was another intense moment, because I realized that when you're writing a pitch too, no matter how brief it is, even if it's a one pager, there has to be a hook there, like something that will make someone say, oh, wow, I see potentials in this, learning how to market your work. So that was what I used. And then I was just reaching out to people, even if they asked for a resume and I didn't have one, because then it took a long while before my vertical was um should I say produced.
Yeah.
So even if I said, yeah, I was writing verticals, yeah, I think I rounded up my project around April, but my vertical was produced around August. But within that period, because of how I just started pitching my samples and telling people this is what I was able to get around 3 to 4 jobs then. So it just talk about. So it's just how it is, but at least I was getting something. So I think that's what writers can do. They can just have samples because
Mm-hmm.
it will help them. Yeah,
Yeah.
it will help them to be able to pitch themselves without waiting for when they have a portfolio. Like, everyone starts from somewhere.
Somewhere. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you said you had to reverse engineer from watching it because, like I said, up until what, October, that was when the first book on how to write a vertical. And even then, there was no screenplay in it. It was just giving instructions, like you give
Came out.
instruction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty interesting. But then again, the few people that know about it hadn't started teaching up until, well, hadn't started teaching aggressively up until much recently. So your podcast is
Hmm.
from draft to dollars. The title says everything about your philosophy, which is basically you write a draft and then you try and get it sold, right? So what's the biggest mistake writers make that keep them stuck at the draft and never gets them to the dollars?
So one of the biggest mistakes I've seen a lot of writers. This was why I decided to make this podcast, because I just to have
Mm-hmm.
this podcast. A lot of people are thinking that, oh, let's say you're just being money minded, but that was not the goal. That was not the goal. I was literally just I created this thing as a safe space to make people understand that this is somewhere you can, that there's some phases in a creator's life, in a creative's life, where they are like thinking about how, they are doing things and it's not paying their rent and all. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of their biggest mistakes, because sometimes they are always focusing on the creative side of their work
Mm-hmm.
and not the professional side. It was like, so they had to, I think I needed to tell them that, oh, this is a way of telling you guys that writing is an absolute art, yes,
Mm-hmm.
but if you want to earn from writing, you have to treat it as a skill that exists within an industry. That means
Mm-hmm.
you need to understand formats, study what platforms are producing, learn things, learn how things are sold and developed, be interested, be curious. Don't just be that writer that's like, oh, I'm just gonna write and all. Like, how are you going to pay your rent? So
Yeah.
that's just how it is. So it's just how it is. So some writers they spend years perfecting their drafts, but they never position those drafts in a way that connects them to real opportunities. And it took me signing a lot of terrible contracts. It took me
Oh
to
wow.
learn my lesson out of desperation. So,
Mm.
and I wouldn't even know the kind of loopholes, or whatever I fell into when I was doing that. So yeah, that's just what From Draft to Dollars is. The shift from Draft to Dollars is just, it just happens when a writer begins to think strategically and start asking questions like, oh, where does this writing of mine or this creative work of mine fit in the market, and others like start asking, how will I make my work in demand?
Yeah.
So that was just basically what From Draft to Dollars is.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned terrible contracts because I want us to sit on that for another minute or two. Because I remember around this time last year, I was actually approached to be in one of these reality business TV shows, and we did the interview. They were like, "Okay, we had the filming and everything was okay." And then at the end of it, they were like, "Hey, by the way, here's this contract. Sign the release, and then we can publish this thing and keep going." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So I take a look at it. It was the end of the day after I'd gotten back from filming. Take a look at it and it's like, what the hell? What the hell? What the hell?
And it's
every,
so subtle.
every
Like,
every
if you
clause in
glance
it,
through,
yeah, every clause in it, I was like, what the hell? What the hell? I said, hang on, maybe I'm not a trained
damn.
lawyer. I'm in finance, but I read a lot of contracts when I was working
Mm.
consulting. I said, okay, let me give this to ChatGPT. So I uploaded it to ChatGPT. ChatGPT was like, "Do not sign immediately." I said, "Oh, okay. Then there's a huge problem here." So, what were some of those things that you
Mm.
fell into, or you saw that were terrible, at least at the
Yeah.
beginning, that now you've
So
corrected for?
this started with like my web novel. Yeah, I think my network is acting up.
I can hear you.
So yeah, usually when we're writing for platforms in web novel writing, if you go to the markets there, you see that a lot of Africans, majority of Nigerian writers are working in that place, like in that writing space. And some of us, I told you that I started writing when I was 16 in web
Mm-hmm,
novel.
mm-hmm.
So then when I got a contract, I don't even read it. I just scroll down to where they write
Fine.
the money aspect, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And then I signed the contract. Until it was one day that I was discussing with a lawyer friend.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
I can hear
this
you.
was like 4 years later.
Yeah.
4 years later. Okay. I was discussing with a lawyer friend, and then he was like, can I see your contract? I was like, okay, sure. So he took his time, looked through the contract. He was like, blessing, you just signed your work for 10 years. I was like, how? 10 years. It was like this. And this was something that was very close to me. I was so heartbroken. I was like, are you okay? What are you going to do? Like, how did you just stop writing? Like, I had to ditch the platform, like boycott the platform. I was like, I'm not going to finish this work. So maybe they could terminate the contract. But then another clause there was like, once they terminate it, it still becomes theirs. And then they're going to give it to another writer to finish it.
But
So that was when I learned my lesson.
how old were you when you signed it? How old were you when you signed it? 16?
Yeah.
You were 16 when you signed it?
Yeah. I think I was 17.
Yeah,
I
if
was
you're not,
17. I was
yeah,
17. I
if
think, yeah, I was just
if
entering university.
if you're not 18, 21, you're a minor. That is a void. You need to go back and look. Your age. At that age, you're not responsible to
Oh,
sign anything legally. They should know that.
damn. And
Yes.
it was that
Yeah.
a lot of writers then. I still have like friends, people that write that are 60, that are young. Because it's
Yeah.
like it's very popular among that age and all, but
Yeah, no, no, no. At
it's
that
very
age,
intense
at least before
then.
you turn 18, you're not, it's the law all over the world. You're not legally capable of
Mm,
signing anything because you don't understand your rights and the law. That's why even when you have like a child actor in Hollywood or whatever, the adult parent signs the contract and they explain to the person doing the
mm.
work. You can't sign that. So you might want to revisit that again and see. But yeah, so some of those, okay, so they will own your work for 10 years.
I would.
That's crazy. So right now, since you're now working on verticals, how's the conversation when it comes to contract negotiation been? Has it improved?
For verticals,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. A lot of writers are going to be like they'll support me on this. We have been trying. I don't know. Like
Mm.
I'm not going to mention platforms
Yeah,
obviously,
sure.
but there was a platform I recently worked with, and then I
Hmm.
was like, oh, I'm going to be a writer, and they were like, they acted so much. They were like, okay, review this contract, tell us what you want to change, and then get back to us
Hmm.
and all. I was like, okay, that's cool. Some platforms will just give you the contract and ask you to sign. So I had to like take my time, like you said, ChatGPT to put it that in there. I was like, okay, what are the clauses? Like explain everything to me so I can understand it. Um, then I got to a point where they wrote something like, oh, you can't say you worked on this, or you're not going to attach your name or anything. Like you're not going to take any credit. So I
What?
was like, if you guys told me that I was going to be a ghostwriter for my original IP, I would
Hmm.
have like, okay, fine. You'd have explained to me that I'm a ghostwriter. So I had to go back and argue these points, like literally write down a long email. And they were like, going back and forth, telling me, okay, can you mention it in your portfolio and not your, like not in your IMBD or something? I was like, okay, never mind. I'm not
Yeah.
going to do this because the money was not even that much. It
Yeah.
wasn't okay. This is my original idea, and you can't just take it. And they had
Hmm.
this silly clause where they were like, they can terminate the contract at any time. Even if you've written 30 episodes, they
Hmm.
could just wake up one day and say, we don't want to work with you. And they're
Hmm.
not going to make any payments for
Hmm.
the one that you've already written. It did not make sense. They
Yeah.
just had the whole fixed rate of like, okay, we can pay you after the first 20 episodes and all, but after that, like they can decide to not complete the payments or whatever, or give
Hmm.
you whatever fee they want. It wasn't really making sense, but I understood from that place that this company is a company that has worked with that they have an affiliation with an app, so like with a writing app. So I just
Hmm.
knew that nice, they know what they are doing.
Yeah.
They have been in this thing for a long.
Yeah.
They were not going to budge easily. I just knew that. So that was
Yeah,
just how
you
it
got
is.
caught off where
But
you were
for other
saying with
people, so far,
verticals,
no.
it's still
And
the same
sometimes
since
I'm just
the
like,
company
okay,
is
let me just do this
affiliated with one
because
of the
somebody
web
has to
novels
eat,
companies.
find
But
money, then you just pay
pretty much,
work with the
I was
NDA
going to tell
stuff.
you that
But
yes, when
whenever
it
it's
comes
by
to your own
original
IP, you really don't want to
IP,
like
I'm
sign
very,
away
very
your
I
IP
prefer
and
the
give up the
company
next
giving me
Harry Potter too
something
quickly,
like, okay,
right?
bless you, we have this idea. Can you work on it?
Yeah,
And then
true.
I'll work on it.
Okay. Okay, so we've, we've talked about that, and as we start to wind down, so if a platform decided tomorrow that it wanted to produce um, vertical drama content specifically for African audiences, what would you tell them they need to understand about the market before they write a single scene?
Okay, so the first thing I would tell them is that they need to understand that authenticity matters because Africa is very diverse and audiences can quickly tell when a story doesn't feel grounded in like real cultural experiences. I can cite a lot of times that people make statements about, let me say Nigeria, my country, and they're asking it outside, and then everybody's like, oh, you just made a mistake. Like, why would you say someone that is Igbo has a Yoruba name, something like that? Like, we have over 500 should I say languages. Yeah, so it's like they need to understand how authenticity is. They need to understand that they need to be very authentic when they are trying to bring something for African audiences, and they need to understand like the social dynamics of an African our everyday reality, something that we could relate to, because we've seen what works for the Chinese, we've seen what works for the Western audience. So when it comes to Africa, we still have what works for us. So yeah, and then most of the compelling stories they could try, if they want to, could span with like ambition, loyalty stories, love, betrayal. A lot of those stories are one of the things that can get an African interested. And another important factor I would say is like understanding our language and our tone, because even if the content might be produced in English or something, cultural context still matters because it shapes how the characters speak and interact. So when they watch something, I recently taught a class on localization and adaptation. So this was very important too, because when they do something, people are going to be able to understand it emotionally. Yeah. So another approach I would say is just also, if the platform is a foreign platform, they should just collaborate with local writers and learn from them, because that's the only way they could help themselves. So yeah.
Okay. That brings up an interesting point. That brings up an interesting point, which is essentially localization is not just dubbing it into English, right? It's more about cultural nuances as well. So for a writer sitting
Exactly.
around the world, whether it's in Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, even wherever, who has the skill but does not know how to connect the writing skill to writing verticals and wants to connect to the global vertical drama industry, what's the single most important thing you would tell them to do today?
The most important, I've always preached about this,
Mm,
and I cannot like emphasize it enough, is visibility. It's very important. A lot of people don't know how much being visible can help them.
mm,
I used to work for someone that would tell me, Blessing, don't be inside the box. Like, why are you thinking outside the box? Always be outside that box. So it's just how it is. Like, your talents can be important, but people need to find you. If they can't find you, if
mhm.
you have talent but nobody can find you, then what's the use?
Yours,
You're
yeah.
just going to be there. Yeah. So a lot of writers are already skilled, but they just stay invisible because they're only like creating, they're not showing up. And especially in vertical format too, if you want to understand how it works, you can, sometimes people always ask me, okay, you're saying that we should post, but what should we post? I'm like, you don't have to impress anybody. You can talk about your journey in learning verticals. Just be authentic. Talk
Hmm.
about yourself. Like you can just say about anything. Storytelling is very important because
Yeah.
when you share your thoughts, like you don't know who is going to see it. I've
Hmm.
seen a lot of people, a lot of producers that have reached out to me and they're like, "Hi, Blessing. So I see your post. You're very good. Like, would you like to write?" And I'm like, wow, this person has never liked my post before.
Yeah.
So it's just how it is. Like, so it means they are actually watching. They're actually watching. They're seeing you there, but you don't know. Some people don't know that. So I think if they position themselves like publicly, they don't have to show. They can pick a text platform. If they're scared of showing their videos on TikTok or Instagram,
Hmm.
like me, for example, I've leveraged LinkedIn so well. I just love to use LinkedIn. I
Hmm.
don't even use any other platforms like that. So it's just how it is. So I think that if they share that, because for me, I started sharing my thoughts on writing. I was breaking down structure, like I told you how Shorting found me. I was breaking out the structure of novel writing and web novel writing, the whole concept, the troops, the dress, and all that, and they reached out to me. So
Hmm.
yeah, visibility is what led me to my first vertical gig. Some people might call it luck, but I don't think it's luck because I worked hard to put myself out there. I was someone that was learning, and I was just learning openly. I was learning loudly. So the reality is just simple that once you are visible as a writer, opportunities will find you. So someone is always watching, no matter what, always have this mindset. Someone is always watching
Watching. Yeah.
because the internet has even removed a lot of geographical barriers. I know there
Yep.
was some time, like sometimes how many years ago, sometimes you wouldn't have gotten content that someone was seeing in Canada or something, but now you can see everything. Like
Yeah.
it's that big. So yeah, so being consistent and visible, that's the only thing I can advise. That's the only thing.
Yeah. And I would also like say that yes, you could say it is luck, but the more visible you are, there's this thing called luck surface area. So I don't know if you
Mm,
studied science, but surface area is just basically the area of a particular thing on the surface, right? So the
Okay.
bigger your surface area, the more easy it is for people to find you and touch you and reach out to you. So whether it's
Mm,
like a table, a car, whatever, the bigger you make it to seem, the bigger you make your presence, what you're learning, how you treat the space, how you're adapting some stories into verticals, because you talked about adapting a French story into an African one. The more people are able to see and follow your journey, they might.
mm,
I've done business with a lot of people on LinkedIn that have never liked my post. I didn't even know they were reading, but turns out they were reading. Turns out they
yeah.
were like, oh, they've read something of mine in the public somewhere in the magazine or something somewhere, and they're like, come back and just follow and keep seeing your stuff. You have to put in that first effort to ensure that your ability to get found is easier versus you just sitting
Yeah.
and writing on your own blog. That's why I always tend to advise that people don't focus on writing on your own blog or your own platform because it's not the
Yeah.
easiest things to be found. It's easy to be found on
True.
LinkedIn, on Instagram, TikTok, whatever. But at the same time, you don't want to build 100% there. So I'm a big advocate for like also having a newsletter because you can then own the
Yeah.
relationship with the person. But it's good for them to find you on a public platform. Just make sure you funnel that relationship back to something you own and then continue the relationship that way. So
Yeah.
as we
That,
close out the interview, you're a writer, correspondent, coach, and a podcast host. At this point in your career, what role matters to you and why?
this was a very tricky question. When I saw it, I was like, this is a tricky. But I think like at the center of everything I do, if you check it well, is still storytelling because writing has always been like the foundation and it's the craft that connects all these roles I do together. Like
Hmm.
everything I do that is just spread out is still
Yeah,
in writing. I write
right.
my scripts for my podcast. As a correspondent, I write articles, interview people. As a coach, I still write in a way. So it's just how it is, like my lesson notes and all. So writing has just been that main craft.
Hmm.
And I also value other aspects of my work because it helps me contribute to building a larger ecosystem. So rather than seeing these roles like as a separate thing, I
Hmm.
think of them as, different ways of participating in the growth of like this emerging storytelling industry. I'm very big on the creative industry and all.
Hmm.
So yeah, the most meaningful part is like me being involved in shaping how writers understand and assess this space. So I don't know if coaching wins, but I just love to see people like, learn, and I just love to like, help them in a way, like, in whatever way I can. It's just something that is part of me. I could be terrible at teaching, but at least I know that I've impacted someone's life. So
Yeah.
it's just how it is. Like, so yeah, I think that's one of the most like meaningful parts for me, apart from
Mhm.
writing.
Okay, that's a good answer. That's a good answer. So, Blessing, before I let you go, tell us where people can find you, where they can reach out to you if they want to learn more about you, or if they even possibly want to get you to work on any of their projects. Could you tell us maybe your website, your social media handle, anything else you want to share that can connect people back to you?
Yes, so far I think you can just find me on LinkedIn because that's where I am most of the time.
Okay.
That's where I've built myself. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and then yeah, we can just once you connect, I'm always going to accept immediately. Like I'm very active there. I feel like I've channeled my strength on LinkedIn. So that is where you can find me. So yeah,
Okay.
blessings.
So, yeah, so I'll be sure to put your LinkedIn profile link on the notes once this episode is ready to go live, and then people can click on that and reach out to Blessing if you want to work with her, if you want to learn from her. So, with that said, everyone, thanks for coming to listen to another episode of Vertical Film School. And before I forget, we're also hosting the Microdrama Summit, which is coming real soon in June. So look out for that. We'll be sharing all the information on social media. So if you want to learn more from people like Blessing, who are pioneers in the space, as well as teaching people how to break into the space, monetize, and grow their businesses and their services, then the Microdrama Summit is for you. So you can check it out on microdramasummit.com. I'll put the link somewhere down below, or you just go to www.microdramasummit.com. And this, of course, this has been a podcast produced by verticaldrama.jobs.com. So if you're looking for a job in the vertical drama industry, whether as a front office person in one of the apps, if you want to write, if you want to act, be sure to sign up in our talent registry. We'll also put the link somewhere below. I keep pointing like this because there's nothing right now, but somewhere below, somewhere below, just verticaldrama.jobs.com/talent, and you can sign up in the registry, and we'll send job alerts every week. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time in the next class. Cheers.
Yeah. Bye.